Hello BookTube, this is part 30 of my 2022 library tour, Science Fiction and Fantasy 7. I'm also going to be finishing the second bookcase today, so let's get going. The first book is another book by Sarah Gailey. This is Magic for Liars. This is an urban fantasy mystery novel about a private detective hired by the principal of a school of magic to investigate the death of one of the teachers. One of the school's teachers happens to be the detective's sister. So the detective investigates and meets some students, interacts with the teaching staff, has a rapprochement with her sister, so on and so forth. And it's one of the worst mysteries I've ever read. The mystery side of the novel it's just bad. The magic school side I kind of liked. Had it been expanded, had certain maybe problematic elements of the story not been there, but I did not like this novel at all. Next are two books by Neil Gaiman. First is Neverwhere, and I think I picked it up from either the Friends of the Library Book Sale Nook or from one of the Friends of the Library Book Sale, probably the fiction one. I had a bit of a Gaiman kick a few years ago and wanted to pick it up, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. The other book by Neil Gaiman that I have read is American Gods. American Gods is his big, epic, contemporary American fantasy novel that came out in about 2000, 2001. And it's about various gods who have immigrated to the United States and are struggling to survive in the face of new gods. It's an amazing novel, although it did take me some time to get into it. I had a copy from the Science Fiction Book Club shortly after it came out, and I didn't quite get on with the novel then, but years later I checked it out from the library, and I did quite enjoy it, and I've wanted it back ever since. And when I saw this UK edition, I picked it up from Book Depository, because it looks really neat. The next batch of books are by William Gibson. First is Burning Chrome, this is a bit of a short story collection, and I think essay collection as well, that I picked up from the Friends of the Library Book Sale Nook. Burning Chrome is quite an interesting, quite good short story, I think. I also have the first two novels in the Sprawl trilogy, his seminal cyberpunk trilogy. First is Neuromancer, which I picked up in San Francisco, got rid of, and then picked back up from Golden's Book Exchange. And Count Zero, which I picked up from Golden's, and which I think I quite like a bit more than I do Neuromancer, but I do need to revisit both of them. It's been forever since I've read them. Next is The Difference Engine by William Gibson and Bruce Sterling. This is one of the seminal works in steampunk, which is Victorian. Well, I guess the thing is what exactly does what is meant by punk in regards to science fiction and fantasy literature, and then figuring out what all of the sort of adjectives that kind of go before punk. But this is steampunk, which is basically sort of a more technologically advanced Victorian period. I haven't gotten around to this yet. Next is two books by Max Gladstone. This is 3 parts Dead, which I quite enjoyed. Pretty good. I don't quite remember what the series name is, though. But it's about a this weird world in which the magic system is very sort of corporate and capitalistic, and where the gods have been sort of exiled or done away with in favor of a more sort of capitalistic magic system. It's quite good. And I also have the immediate sequel, to Serpents Rise, which is again quite good. And this series is called The Craft Sequence, which I think there's about 4 or 5 novels in it, if I remember. But it's been a while since I've read either one of them. Next is The Women's War by Jenna Glass. This came out about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe closer to 4 now. It's about a young woman who finds herself queen of an incredibly sexist country, who, in order to save her throne, leads a number of women to a promised sort of sanctuary space where I think they learn magic. It's been a while since I've looked at it. I bought it shortly after it came out, and I've been a bit leery of reading the book because I'm not terribly fond of exaggerated gender differences in science fiction and fantasy, say where one gender or another has magical powers while the other one doesn't. And that kind of doesn't sit right with me. And I'm also not entirely fond of like exaggerated sort of sexist societies, one way or the other. That always bugs me as well, because it comes up as being a bit artificial. But I probably should have a go at this book sometime this month, or soon-ish. Next is The Conductors by Nicole Glover. This is a historical fantasy novel featuring an occult detective. And it's about 2 conductors on the Underground Railroad who have become occult detectives in 1871 Pittsburgh. I've had a go at this novel twice and bailed both times. I don't particularly care for the main character, Hetty, so yeah. Next is the Conan pastiche. This is Conan the Valiant, which I don't think I've ever actually read, now that I think about it. I read a number of these Tor Conan pastiches when I was younger, in my mid-teens. And I quite liked them, but I don't quite think I've read this one. Next is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. This is basically if J.K. Rowling, Donna Tartt, and C.S. Lewis had a 3-way and had a baby. It's basically about a young man named Quentin Coldwater who goes to a college of magic. Once he's accepted, he joins a super exclusive elite club at the school, and eventually goes to a fantasy world sort of like Narnia. Again, J.K. Rowling, Donna Tartt, and C.S. Lewis having a 3-way and having a baby. I've read it before, and I much prefer the Magic College part of it than I do the Narnia part. Next is The 11th Song by Gulong. This is a wuxia novel. It's been a while since I've read it. If I remember correctly, it's about a young traveling warrior with a bad reputation who seeks revenge on the deaths of his parents, and while doing so helps a young woman with her own problems that also revolves around his revenge quest. It's been a while since I've read it, but I remember really loving this novel and wishing more of Gulong's work was translated into English, as well as more wuxia novels in general, which is uh, sort of a Chinese historical martial arts novels, which I kind of see as a bit more fantasy, since the martial arts depicted tend to be more fantastical than in reality. But yeah, it's a really good book. Next is Mage's Blood by David Hare, which I think I first learned about through Blackgate Magazine or something similar, and picked it up, but I've never gotten around to it yet, so I really need to correct that at some point. Uh, Next is The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. This is a seminal work of science fiction from the 70s. It's about a group of soldiers fighting a seemingly never-ending war against an alien species to which humans can't communicate. And it basically shows how these soldiers encountering different iterations of humanity over the centuries of their tour of duty. Basically, there are no FTL drives. There's no FTL, so or faster than light. So basically, everything's done relativistically. So basically, while the soldiers don't really age during their time of service, Earth itself changes radically. I picked this up, I think, at the same time I did The Man in the High Castle, and I liked Men in High Castle. I dipped into this and didn't particularly get on with it, but it has been quite some time, so I probably should revisit it. Next is The Time of the Dark by Barbara Hambly. I think this is a portal fantasy of some kind or another, but I haven't read it. I picked it up from the Friends of the Library book sale, and like most Friends of the Library book sale books at the Nook at the library, they are 25 cents, and for 25 cents you really don't think much about whether or not you're going to like it, because it's 25 cents. The same is also true of The Soror Kings by Edmund Hamilton, although I think Edmund Hamilton is a classic science fiction writer. I haven't gotten around to this one yet. The next book is The Gutter Prayer by Gareth Hanrahan. This is I guess you could say, a medieval-esque weird fantasy, new weird, set in a incredibly fantastical world. It's about a young woman, a runaway, who takes up with the son of a visionary crime lord and a ghoul. And so they basically perform crimes, break-ins, robberies, when they are sort of thrust into a number of fantastical plots, namely some of which revolve around the various members of the group. And it's really good. I quite enjoyed it, although not particularly fond of the character Carolyn, the main one. I much prefer her cousin, and she was sort of the point of view character. But anyway, it was quite good. And I also have the sequel, The Shadow Saint, which sort of takes place about a year or so later, and focuses a bit more on this god war that formed a backdrop of the first book. And this one's okay. I didn't like it as much, but I probably should revisit it because I read it during the beginning of the 2020 science fiction and fantasy and fiction in general collapse. And I've been thinking about picking up the third book in that series sometime soonish. And next, or the last book on this shelf, is Omnibus Edition. This is Veraconium by M. John Harrison. Veraconium is sort of a new weird or proto-new weird city. These novels, I think, came out in the 70s or 80s, so probably were more influential on China Medieval when he did his Boss Log series, and also other new weird works. But anyway, so it's about a far future humanity, about the city of Veraconium, which is so old that it's forgotten its history. And this collection includes a number of the novels. Although I don't know if this is the complete one, or because I think there's an edition that's not entirely complete, or is missing something. I don't know. Anyway, but it has the Pestle City, A Storm of Wings in Veraconium, the Lamian Lord Cromes, Veraconium Knights, The Luck in the Head, Strange Great Sins, Lords of Misrule, The Dancer from the Dance, and A Young Man's Journey to Veraconium. Anyway, so I've read the Pestle City and honestly didn't get on with it all that well. So, and I haven't read any of the others, but maybe I ought to have another go at this. Anyway, so that was part 30 of my 2022 library tour and the science fiction and fantasy 7. So I'll be back tomorrow with part 31 and the continuation of science fiction and fantasy again. This part is individually the longest part of the tour. I have more science fiction and fantasy novels or books than anything else, and especially if you count the manga now. But anyway, so yeah, today I finished off the second bookcase. I'll be starting the third bookcase tomorrow, which will pretty much go throughout the rest of this week because it's only a 3 shelf bookcase, and then I'll start on the fourth one, which will take a while because it's 8. It's a double-sided one, but anyway, I'll explain that when I get to it. But anyway, BookTube, that's all I have for today. So thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.